Še enkrat pozdravljeni vsi skupaj. Dobrodošli na našem ESEF dogodku. V ADD-ju je to že naš 3. dogodek letos. Na tematiko ESEF smo se začeli pripravljati že pred 2 leti. Z osveščanjem trga na tem področju pa smo začeli v letošnjem letu, ko smo januarja organizirali prvi dogodek s partnerji, kjer smo se pogovarjali bolj o novih zahtevah skladno z ESMA pravili. Potem smo v juniju organizirali poslovni zajtrk, kjer smo vam predstavili aplikacijo Raziskava, ki jo ponujamo v partnerstvu z našim podjetjem, slovenskim podjetjem. In sedaj organiziramo 3. dogodek, ki pa je spletni in bo fokusiran bolj na temo kvalitete poročanja. Zakaj je pomembna kvaliteta poročanja v letnih poročilih? In na tem mestu bomo gostili predstavnike organizacije Risk Business Services, ki so naredili vse evropsko obsežno raziskavo, v kateri so vzeli v obzir 700 podjetij, naredili so analizo letnih poročil in ugotovili, da kar nekaj podjetij dela napake pri poročanju. Videli boste, kakšen delež teh podjetij je tudi v Sloveniji. In seveda bojo podali tudi priporočila in smernice, kako se izogniti napakam pri poročanju. Z veseljem pozdravljam v naši družbi tudi Primoža Kovačiča iz Ernst & Young, ki nam bo povedal, kaj je vloga revizorjev, zakaj je pomembna vloga revizorja in jih vključiti v sam ESEF proces poročanja. Potem pa bo tudi Mitja Hafner, direktor prodaje v podjetju ADD, povedal, na kakšen način že sodelujemo s podjetji v Sloveniji in na kakšen način se pripravljamo na uvedbo teh novih mandatov poročanja. Hvala, ker ste z nami. Sedaj pa bom besedo predala ustanoviteljici in direktorici Iris Business Services, gospe Depti Ranžarjan. Hi, Depta. Now I would like to pass my word to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Taya, for the introduction, and dobro jutra for everybody over there. Very, very happy to be a part of this program today, and wish we could be in beautiful Slovenia, but hopefully we will all come together sometime. But glad to be a part of this online webinar today. So the focus of today's webinar is on quality. And in the context of the ESEF mandate, we are going to talk about the quality of disclosures in annual reports and why getting it right is so important. So just a little bit of background or context before that to introduce us and who we are. I am a co-founder and director of Iris Business Services. And we are in the regulatory compliance reporting space now since 2005. We have clients in over 36 countries, and we have a very sharp focus on XBRL and IXBRL, and have actually processed over 5 million filings for 1.5 million entities around the world, including in Europe after the ESEF mandate has come in as well. And we work both with regulators as well as with enterprises. So regulators in many countries are the central banks, the Securities Commission, stock exchange regulators, etc. And enterprises, of course, are banks, issuers, manufacturing from all industries. We have literally worked with every kind of industry and every kind of issuer, large and small. And we have very strong partnerships. In fact, we are very, very proud and very happy to have ADD as a partner. And we have multiple partnerships in and Ernst & Young as well. And we also work with partners like Deloitte, KPMG, PwC, Grant Thornton, all around the world, basically. So some partners are IT firms, some partners are accounting firms, and with different, but our partnerships are very long lasting, and our customer relationships also. And like the focus of this entire webinar is on quality, it is one of the most important things for everybody, the regulator and the issuer. And there are independent quality scores or rankings that are put out by third parties. For example, in the US, if you take a look at this box on the right hand side, you will see that Raziskava consistently scores top on the rankings, like period after period. And you will of course see many other software providers or solutions or services providers, some which are in Europe and some which are not in Europe. But amongst all of them, consistently, Raziskava's quality always comes up on top. So we're again once very delighted to be here, to be part of this webinar today. And Anu, if you can just move to the next slide. So talking about quality, there are a few reasons why quality is very, very, very important. One, of course, because it is very important for the regulator. When a regulator moves to a standard like XBRL or IXBRL, it is even more easy or important. It is even more important because it is very easy to detect quality inconsistencies. And for a regulator, the only way they can govern, or the best way they can govern, is through information or data. And it is using the data that they are able to actually track and detect consistencies, inconsistencies, irregularities. So we all, of course, have heard of world famous scams or scandals. For example, Enron many, many years ago, an energy company that imploded globally, and there was a lot of financial accounting irregularities over there. More recently, of course, we have heard in Germany, Wirecard, very large company, again accounting irregularities, financial irregularities. Now the job of a regulator is actually to somehow track and detect these before a scam or a scandal happens. And the way they can do it is through information. So it is the information that companies submit to regulators that they use to process and track inconsistencies and irregularities. And that is why the quality of what is being submitted is very important. The other reason, of course, why companies need to take quality very seriously is because investors actually use the data that is submitted to make investment choices or decisions. And investors now, it is a global market, it is a connected market, and investors have a lot of choices. So when an investor is making a choice, they want to work with companies where they find it easy to understand the disclosures, where the quality is high, there are no errors, it is transparent, and the trust is very high. And therefore, again, both from the regulator side and from the investor side, quality becomes paramount. Can we move to the next slide, please? So, of course, mistakes always do happen when companies are preparing reports and finalizing their reports that they submit to regulators. And there are, of course, two kinds of mistakes. Some mistakes are just errors. It's silly mistakes or careless errors. So, for example, back in 2015, General Electric, one of the largest companies in the world, they actually reported that their earnings that they had through affiliates outside the US, all of their cumulative earnings that they had not repatriated back to the US, instead of reporting it as 104 billion, they reported it as 104 million. So it would have let the regulator think that, oh my gosh, they're keeping money outside the country, which was not really true. It is a careless mistake. Similarly, in India, there is a very large private bank called Axis Bank, and they had a very large error which ran into billions of dollars in their annual report. Difference between the main statement and the footnotes. What was in the footnotes didn't add up to the main statements. So these are careless. And of course, some are deliberate. It starts with something small and then builds up, but companies like Enron, like Wirecard, or in India, a company called Deccan Chronicle, all of these are deliberate mistakes. What happens with a standard like XBRL, and why a regulator kind of requires information to be filed is The data in XBRL actually, it can be read by machines. It is machine readable. And the minute the machines can read the data, the machines can run algorithms to detect inconsistencies. So XBRL as a standard already has inbuilt validations and calculations. So the data that goes to the regulator is already better quality, and the regulator can also run their own checks on top of that. So because quality is so important, it is the cornerstone of what we focus on as well. This rest of this webinar is actually going to focus on a study that we have done around quality of European companies. Again, to set the context, we actually have looked at annual reports of companies across the world, and just by converting or mapping them to XBRL, we are able to understand and determine what kind of qualities or inconsistencies there are in reports around the world. The focus of today's webinar is, of course, limited to Europe, to European to European companies. I'm so sorry. And with this, I will turn this over to Anu. Can you move to the next slide, please, Anu? Yeah, with this, I will turn this over to Anu to talk about the actual study that we have done and what learnings we have had, both on the quality side, how companies can avoid quality errors, or how they can up the quality errors, how XBRL can help them, and also some other presentation.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Yes?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect.
So I would just like to introduce the Anu. She's the Director of Quality, and she will now present the study they performed in IRIS.
Thank you. Thank you, Thaya. And very, very good morning to everyone.
Anu, please unmute yourself. We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's better.
Okay. So I was just saying good morning, everyone. So like Deepta just mentioned, we've already done an extensive study about the European companies' annual reports by converting these annual reports into the upcoming regulation, which is the ESEF regulation, into a format which is our XBRL. So there were some questions that we wanted to kind of take a look at when we were doing the study. And some of the most important ones were to actually think about is, how good is the quality of disclosures of the companies in the EU in terms of reporting? So that was one of the main questions. Apart from that, can the adoption of our XBRL actually improve the quality of what is being reported currently by companies in the EU? And now that this new regulation is going to come up, what can a filer actually can do in order to ensure that the filing that they're doing to the national regulator is error-free? And does a software that they're picking or the service that they're picking, how do you ensure that whatever you're picking for your ESEF compliance actually helps you in delivering the right quality of filings that you want to? And another important point is to think about is, how complete is the ESEF taxonomy? Because, different industries have different types of reporting. Some industries have a very complex way of reporting. So how adequate is the ESEF taxonomy for this upcoming regulation? And to what extent do companies have to be, compliant with the ESEF taxonomy? And to what extent do they have to deviate from the ESEF taxonomy and create extensions? So these were the main questions that we thought we should address, especially since this new format and reporting is kind of coming up. So what we did is that, we actually took a sample, and across the EU, in each country, we took 20% of listed companies. So that was what we aimed for. And we had actually covered minimum of 10% of the number of listed companies in each country. We also had a balanced representation of the companies between small caps and large caps, because that is again a very important factor. We also expanded the sample beyond these, these percentages in few countries like France and Germany, where the number of listed companies are higher in number. And in total, what we did was we actually converted the annual report of 671 companies all across Europe. And specifically coming to Slovenia, what we did was we actually picked 17 companies from the Slovenian market, and we wanted to actually take a look at how does the quality shape up for these Slovenian companies as well. While this was a little bit of information on the sample that we picked, what did we actually do and how did we conduct the study? So as a first step, what we did was we identified these companies based on the parameters which I just explained. We downloaded their annual reports from the websites. We converted these reports into XBRL using our ESEF solution, which is Raziskava. We tried and mapped each of the lines in the primary financial statements to the tags available in the ESEF taxonomy, and we created extensions where it was applicable or needed. As the next step, once the tagging activity was done, we created this XBRL document, and this XBRL document was actually validated with an XBRL International Certified Validator. This is to check the conformance with the ESEF rules and the XBRL validation rules, which has been defined by the global consortium, XBRL International. And the results of what we found were actually reviewed and analyzed by our experts. And in terms of analyzing the results that came in, there were certain categories of findings that we had. There were a bunch of companies which had rounding off mistakes, which we actually ignored. But there were certain reporting mistakes, which we actually went in deeper to analyze what the types of mistakes were and how did these mistakes get caught in these annual reports. So this is the methodology that we actually followed in going ahead and tagging the 671 annual reports across all countries in the EU.
Anno, please unmute yourself.
Oops, I think for some reason this goes on mute by itself. I'm sorry about that. So in terms of effort, if we have to define the effort which has gone into this entire study, we've actually gone ahead and analyzed companies in all the 27 countries. And of course, 671 was the sample companies that we had analyzed across the 27 countries. We bifurcated these companies based on different industries, based on what industries they were from. So the study comprised of 27 different industries that we have identified, and there were 50 XBRL experts who had gone ahead and analyzed and tagged these companies and analyzed these companies. More importantly, if you actually take a look at the concepts that we have tagged, you'd be seeing that 95,982 concepts have been tagged across 671 companies, which itself speaks a lot about the amount of conversion that we have actually done. And this has been done within 10,000 man-hours. So here's the effort of what we've actually done. And now moving on to the next slide, here are what the results look like. So this is a quick snapshot country-wise of the number of companies that we have actually reviewed in each country and the number of companies which had reporting mistakes. So out of a total of 671 companies, you will actually see that close to 66 companies had mistakes, which is close to 10% of the sample, which is kind of quite big. Coming to specifically on Slovenia, we analyzed 17 companies, out of which 4 companies had reporting mistakes. So please bear in mind, these are not companies with rounding off mistakes, but these are companies which have genuine reporting mistakes. And this accounts to close to 24% of companies having mistakes in their annual report just in Slovenia. And this is a quick glimpse of what companies that we have picked for the sample. So out of the 17, you can see that these are some of the companies that we have actually analyzed for quality. So you can see some prominent names like, Inter Europa, like Luca Cooper, Mercator, NLB, Petrol, etc. So these were the 17 companies that we had picked for our study, and we had converted the annual report of these companies into inline XBRL. And now we'll get a little deep dive into what type of findings that we actually had while analyzing the companies. So you'd see here that overall 74% of the companies that we had analyzed had mistakes, which is classified as totaling mistakes. So this is the highest amount of mistakes, or the most common mistakes of the study that we identified are totaling mistakes. Totaling mistakes, you must be kind of a little surprised. We all know it's like 1 + 1 = 2, but for example, there are companies who report a 1 + 1 = 5. So that is what we define as totaling mistakes, where the numbers do not sum up or add up correctly.
Anu, could you just, yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. So the next category of mistake, the highest one was the totaling mistake. The next category of mistake is what is called as the mismatch value category. So in the mismatch value, what we define by mismatch value is that, as an example, you have reported, let's say 100 million of profit in your income statement, but your cash flow reports a completely different number, maybe 105 or 106 million. So you definitely cannot have two different values being reported for a single concept. And that accounted for close to about 22% of mistakes. This was then followed by incorrect sign and incorrect date. So incorrect sign indicates a particular number was supposed to be reported as a positive value. However, it has been reported as a negative value. And again, to our surprise, we did kind of see, a company reporting incorrect dates in its annual report itself. So these were the type of mistakes that we found in these 66 companies. And the important or the shocking fact is that totaling mistakes actually accounted close to 74%. And the next one is to kind of walk you through of what were the statements in which these mistakes were found. You'll actually see that 52% of the mistakes were actually in the cash flow statement. So usually cash flow statements have a lot of numbers being reported in positives and negatives with inflows and outflows, etc. The highest number of mistakes were actually found in the cash flow statement, followed by the equity statement, and then the balance sheet, the comprehensive income statement, and then the income statement, the statement of profit or loss, or the income statement, what we call it. So the highest number of mistakes, like we see here, is actually on the cash flow statement. So when you're creating your XBRL documents, you may definitely want to pay a more close attention on tagging of how the numbers get tagged on your cash flow statements and in the equity statements, because these are the two statements which are actually slightly complex when it comes to tagging or creating your XBRL reports. Moving further, we also went to take a look at whether out of the 66 companies that had mistakes, what were the type of companies? Were they small companies? Were they big companies? So what came as a surprise to us that, you can see here that a majority of the companies were actually mid and large caps. So usually it's kind of sometimes, people think whenever there are mistakes, whenever there are information which is not reported correctly, or when there are no proper internal controls or governance, it is usually a feature of small cap companies. But when we took a look at these numbers, what we saw was that this was not the case. In fact, it was the large caps and the mid caps which had the highest number of mistakes. And out of 44, you'd be surprised to see that 40 of the companies were all of the mid and large caps, and the remaining were the small caps. And further on, we also wanted to kind of see what type of mistakes were present in the reports, and was there any particular relation to the type of industry, or is there a particular industry that had more common reporting mistakes. So again, we did an analysis of the 66 companies and we bifurcated into different industries, and we saw that the companies or the firms who are in the banking, financial, and in the insurance sector had the highest number of mistakes. And this was actually followed by consumer goods, manufacturing, real estate, and so on. So there's like a direct correlation between the complexity of disclosures and the quantum of the mistakes which is done. And in general, what we've also seen is that companies or firms who are in the banking, real estate, and in insurance sectors, their reporting is kind of very, very complex compared to other kind of industries or other kind of sectors. So if you're a banking company, or if you're an insurance company, or a financial services, or consumer goods, or in the manufacturing or real estate, you may want to pay more close attention when it comes to ESEF, because there could be a few things that that could go wrong, or you do not want to take that chance. So especially companies who are in this sector, so please do have a little more focused attention on the type of reporting that you already have, which we do understand is a complex one. But when it comes to ESEF, so the taxonomy is also not fully adequate to kind of support everything that you're reporting. So in a nutshell, we did kind of see that the overall industry and the type of companies in that industry also has a correlation on the type of mistakes which was there in that particular sector. Moving on to the next slide. So this is a very interesting slide, by the way, where this gives you a little bit of more information on what are the types of information that is present in the taxonomy. So here what we did was, again here the 671 companies are bifurcated between different sectors that you can see here on the left. The banking, insurance and financial services were 100 companies, real estate was like 59 companies, and so on. So a total of 95,000 concepts have been tagged. And out of that, what we saw was that close to 10% of the companies had extensions. And if you take a look at from an industry-wise perspective, the banking, insurance, and the financial services sector, companies in this sector had 15% extensions, followed by real estate, which is 12% extensions, and utility companies, which is again a 12% extensions. So what this indicates is that while the complexity of reporting of these type of entities in these industries is complex, there is a high level of extensions which needs to be created when you are complying with ESEF. So that's a very important point to note. And another thing that is kind of very important to note is that whether you're using a product or a service, it's kind of very important to know how are these extensions being created. And you really need to have visibility on what is being extended. So if you're going to sign up with a service provider or a solution provider, it is very, very critical that you are able to view the extensions that is being created, because this is going to be the part of the final package that will be submitted to the regulator. So it's very important that you take a look at your extensions, and even what ESMA says is that you should be creating extensions only when it is necessary. Just because you may not find few tags in some sections, that doesn't mean the later part of the taxonomy does not have tags. So therefore, you need to be very cautious when you go ahead and do the mapping activity of your annual financial reports. And please make sure that extensions are created only when needed and not unnecessarily. And the most important point here is that no matter who your vendor is, you need to have full visibility to see your extensions. So that's a very important point to highlight here. Like you can see here, 10% of the overall sample had extensions, but companies in this industry had even higher percentages of extensions. And if you create extensions unnecessarily, that's not a good practice. And when you have extensions, you will start anchoring, which is also not a good practice if it is something that was already present in the taxonomy. So now moving on to the next part of the slide, which is on how did we go ahead and find these kind of mistakes, and how did we detect these mistakes in the annual reports. So the evidence was gathered by going ahead and validating these 671 companies with a validator, which is a validator that we have, which is also an XBRL International Certified Validator. The first type of mistakes, in the previous slides, I had explained about 4 types of mistakes that we saw. The first category of mistake was the totaling mistake. And the way we identified this type of mistake is that this is an example of a company from their annual report. You can see that this is a cash flow statement. And in the net cash generated from financing activities, the company should actually report an 18,000. So the number should have been 18 here. However, the company has reported a number 181. So when the entire financial statement or the cash flow statement was tagged, and when we went ahead and validated this XBRL document, so there is a check in XBRL, which is called as a calculation check, which actually triggered this alert saying that the company should have actually reported the value of financing activities as 18,000, but the company has actually reported it as 181,000. So this is a mistake, and in fact it should have been a minus 18,000, but the company has reported a positive 181,000. So this validation clearly showed that there is a difference in reporting, and this is what XBRL can actually do to you. So if you get your information wrong, the validation will actually help you in triggering information that this is being reported incorrectly. The second type of mistake, or the category that we went through, was mismatch in values, meaning you can't have two different numbers for a single reporting concept. So here is an example of another company. So they have reported profit for the year. Here you can see the number as 10,181,228 for the current period and 14,681,738 for the prior period. While this is the profit for the year that they have reported, in this very same statement, they also have a bifurcation of this profit between non-controlling interest and to the owners or the parent entity, and therefore they have a total. So you'll be surprised to see here that the totals that they have reported here does not even match here, which means in the same statement they've got a mistake where they have reported two different numbers for profit for the year. While this would have been humanly impossible to go ahead and identify, with the XBRL, there is another check which says, duplicate checks, which immediately triggers that, hey, by the way, when you have two different numbers that you report for a particular item, in this case, this line was mapped with the ESEF taxonomy element profit loss, and the validator actually came up with a validation alert saying that there are two different numbers reported for one item, which is actually incorrect. So this is an example of how the mismatch values were actually identified. Moving on to the third category, which was incorrect signs. Here is again an example from an annual report where the company has reported an operating profit. You can see it's a profit which is being reported, and the company has some expenses, and the expenses are very clearly less than the operating profit, and the company has reported a profit before tax. However, if you see the numbers here, it's a 27,000 and something less a 902, which should actually be a profit which is being disclosed here. But you can see that the company has reported a loss and in parentheses. So again, when we ran the validator, the calculation checks actually identified that this number should have been a profit, meaning it should have been a positive number and a profit which should have been reported. Instead, the company has reported a loss. So this is like one of those terrible mistakes which no company would intend to. They would never want to report losses. But here you can clearly see that even though the company should have actually should have reported a profit, they have gone ahead and reported a loss. So this is another example of how we identified incorrect numbers being reported with incorrect signs. And even across the world, when we've kind of analyzed companies, across different countries, what we've seen is that incorrect signs actually account to one of the highest amount of mistakes that companies actually go ahead and do in their XBRL and their IXBRL filings. So therefore, when you're actually going ahead and getting prepared for ESEF reporting, please do also pay special attention to incorrect signs if you may have any, because this is the right time to take a look at your financials, because you've just published a 2019 and 2020 report. You still have a few months to go. The next category of the error is incorrect date. So in this company, you can see that they've reported a consolidated cash flow statement, and it seems pretty okay. But when we went ahead and tagged this report, again, we had a duplicate check, which was showing that there are two different numbers for a single date. So when we went ahead and again took a closer look at the report, what we saw that the company had actually got the wrong dates on its header itself. So you can see here that similar date has been used both for the current period and for the prior period information as well. So while some of these are not actually intentional, but they are actually present in the annual report. And now what would happen is that when the information is going to be in this digital reporting format, all of these kind of mistakes start getting noticed very quickly than what you expect. So this was the fourth category of mistake. And so just to kind of sum up of what we've seen so far. So these examples actually clearly show that it was definitely not something which was intentional by the company to have reported such numbers or to have reported such disclosures, but they exist in the annual report. So now that with ESEF, your entire reporting is going to be more digital, and this will actually be opening up doors for more transparent financial reporting. What is more also important is to see that how can a software that you choose for ESEF reporting help you with not making such kind of errors. So while you're kind of evaluating the softwares, I think there are many in the market. So we thought we should kind of give you a little bit of highlight on what are the things that you should actually watch out for when you are actually preparing for your ESEF filings and during your vendor evaluation process as well. So one of the important things that you need to go ahead and check is that, does the software that you're going to buy or that you've already bought has the ability to validate numbers against the taxonomy? And does it have the ability to literally show you the errors? So you should be able to see the errors, if at all there are any, right on the face of your review process. So that's going to be very critical. So having a product which has a validator built into it is a very critical point that you need to watch out for. And if there are any kind of omissions in reporting, the software that you're going to choose should also help you identify such omissions. As an example, there are some mandatory tags that ESMA has published. For example, if there is a mandatory tag that is not tagged, you should have the visibility of seeing that. So if it's being done somewhere in the background, or if it's being done somewhere by a service provider and you cannot see it, then you cannot trust fully what you're going to submit. So make sure that whatever you're going to go ahead and submit, you are able to validate, you're able to see things like omissions, mandatory checks, etc. yourself. And another important point is to make sure that whatever software that you're going to choose is also collaborative. For one simple reason that the financial reporting process itself is a highly collaborative one. There are a lot of versions going back and forth, not just internally. ESEF documents also needs to be audited by your auditors. So you also have an external angle to it. So with the collaborative software, what happens is that all of you are working on one centralized document and you have full visibility and control of your document. So even if you want to make things like, last minute changes, etc., you have full control of what needs to be done. So having a collaborative software definitely helps from a process perspective, both for you internally and also for your auditors. And there is also certified softwares from XBRL International. So XBRL International, for those who are new to this name, XBRL International is the global consortium which manages and comes up with the standards for XBRL. So XBRL International has a certification program that certifies software vendors. So make sure that the software that you're using is an XBRL certified one. There were also ESEF field tests which was conducted by ESMA. So also make sure that the software that you're evaluating has passed the ESEF field test. So a combination of these two will be also an important factor for you to evaluate from a quality perspective, how good is the software. And moving on to the next point, which is also very important, by the way. So the software that you're using should also have the taxonomy, which is integrated. So if you want to see the taxonomy, you should be able to see it very easily. And every company is supposed to create their own taxonomy, which is called as a company taxonomy, which is an extension of the ESEF taxonomy. So therefore, there is a large amount of work which is involved in creating the company's specific taxonomy. So therefore, the software should also have a taxonomy editor that allows you to go ahead and see what is being done. And if you want to change something, you should be able to either request a change, but you should be able to definitely be seeing the taxonomy editor where your own company taxonomy is actually created. And one more important point when it comes to the taxonomy creation is that now we know that companies are supposed to use the ESEF taxonomy elements where needed, and create extensions only when necessary. So if you have a software which is able to give you suggestions on what to tag, suggestions on when to extend, etc., that will be an excellent approach. Of course, if the software also has capabilities of suggesting anchoring tags, etc., that will also be a very good, a very good help in terms of going through the process. And another very important point is to kind of see and focus is actually on the extensions part and on the anchoring part, and overall on the company taxonomy creation process itself. So since the company taxonomy, like I said, this is a package that you will have to create for each company. What is expected by ESMA is that the companies are supposed to go through the taxonomy and pick the elements from the taxonomy. In addition to that, every company is also supposed to create its own taxonomy. And these set of company taxonomy files is what will be submitted to the regulator. So therefore, it's extremely critical and most important that you have full visibility of this company taxonomy. So if you do not see the company taxonomy, if you do not see the extensions which have been created or the anchoring which has been created, you're completely in a black box, which is definitely not a good situation to be in. So make sure that during your review process or when you're evaluating the softwares for ESEF, that you have full visibility of the company taxonomy, because only when you see it is when you're reviewing it. If you are not seeing it, then you're trusting something that you're not seeing, which is kind of very, very scary, by the way. So again, on the last point, even without a team of experts or like a full house, in-house capability, if you have like the right software and the right set of assistance from a service provider, you'll be able to go ahead and generate a high quality, error-free, inline XBRL of filing. So these were some of the main points which we thought we should kind of definitely highlight to you, because I think this is the time when most of the companies should be paying attention to the ESEF topic. And when it comes to quality, it's kind of very important to also consider these aspects. Thank you.
Thank you, Anu. Na tem mestu bi dodala, tako kot je Mitja Hafner opisal v komentar, vkolikor imate vprašanja, bomo na njih definitivno odgovorili na koncu oziroma lahko tudi sedaj po koncu vsakega sklopa. Gospa Nina, ki ste komentirali, da je vaše podjetje tudi na seznamu, kateri so naredili checking, bomo se povezali po tem dogodku in bomo individualno samo vam podali rezultate te raziskave, tako da je možno dobiti to zadevo. Sedaj pa predajam besedo Mitji Hafnerju iz našega podjetja, ki vam bo povedal, na kakšen način se z ADD pripravlja na ESEF poročanje z našimi partnerji. Mitja, izvoli.
Lep pozdrav vsem udeležencem. Z nekaterim od vas oziroma večino od vas smo že v kontaktu oziroma smo celo vedno bolj pogosto v diskusiji, kako pristopati k tovrstnemu projektu. Tako kot je že Taja na začetku povedala, dejansko je to že tretji dogodek v seriji ESEF poročanja. Tako smo v bistvu na začetku leta predvsem govorili, kaj ESEF prinaša, na kaj se morate podjetja pripraviti. Potem smo v junijskem dogodku že predstavili posamezne možne procese, kako se bojo podjetja lotevale tega novega tipa poročanja in predvsem primere uporabe procesa v sami aplikaciji Raziskava. Na tem mestu vas bi mogoče pozval k temu, da si tudi sproti ogledujete našo spletno stran, kajti sproti vedno bolj pogosto objavljamo članke na to temo. Tako vidite, da samo v zadnjem mesecu smo pripravili kar zanimivi gradiv, predvsem kaj prinaša XBRL, zakaj je pomembna kakovost poročanja, kakšen bo generalni vpliv enotnega načina poročanja za vse javne družbe in seveda tudi tema mojega današnjega pogovora, kako izbrati pravega ponudnika oziroma kaj morate biti pozorni pri samem izboru informacijske rešitve, ki vam bo omogočala ta proces priprave novega ESEF poročanja. Jaz danes seveda ne morem govoriti, kako se bo posamezno podjetje odločalo. Vsak od vas bo imel svoje kriterije, s komu iti na to pot. novega tipa ESEF poročanja. Bi pa pač omenil, bom rekel, 7 korakov, na kaj morate paziti, zato da boste dejansko učinkovito ta proces imeli pod kontrolo, da boste imeli varno okolje, da boste nazadnje lahko oddali kvalitetna, preverjena letna poročila in seveda, da bo proces zanesljiv, da boste lahko zaupali, da boste lahko vseh rokih, ki so vezani na ta ESEF poročanje, dejansko jih izvedli. Seveda prvi korak za vse podjetje in verjamem, da ste vsi že, bom rekel, skrbno k temu pristopili, je seznanitev z zahtevami, koraki in seveda samo obsegu mapiranja na ESEF taksonomijo. Z mnogimi med vami smo, bom rekel, to pot že prehodili in ste že v naslednjih fazah tega procesa. Seveda pa za one, ki se šele začenjajo s tem spoznavati, smo v letošnjem letu tudi prilagodili našo, bom rekel, pristop k posameznemu podjetju. Zato, bom rekel, vsem podjetjem omogočamo brezplačen enodnevni spoznavni trening na vašem letnem poročilu, kjer dejansko vi na vašem letnem poročilu in v aplikaciji Iris Carbon gremo čez korake in lahko, bom rekel, vidite samo kompleksnost tega tipa poročanja. Lahko vidite, kako same validacije znotraj same informacijske rešitev dejansko izgledajo, na kaj vas opozarjajo. In ta brezplačen enodnevni spoznavni trening je bil narejen že za prvih nekaj strank. Jaz mislim, da za tiste, ki dejansko še niso, bom rekel, sprejeli neke odločitve, po kateri poti grejo, predlagamo, da k temu zadevi čim prej predstopijo, kajti dejansko, bom rekel, v praksi dobite realne izkušnje, kaj bo to od vas zahtevalo v naslednjem letu. Seveda, naslednja točka je pričeti takoj, ko bo to mogoče. Vsi se zavedamo, da je praktično čez pol leta bomo vsi v procesu novega tipa priprave ESEF poročila in za podjetja, bom rekel, ki se zavedajo, da se pojavljajo določene spremembe, da so v časovni stiski v naslednjem letu, ker bo treba, bom rekel, to poročilo oddati. Vsekakor predlagamo, da po brezplačnem enodnevnem treningu pristopijo k večdnevnemu izobraževanju. Tukaj je odvisno, za posamezna podjetja smo oblikovali dvodnevna izobraževanja, za posamezno podjetje zaradi več specifik oziroma mogoče večje kompleksnosti so to trodnevna izobraževanja. Glavni namen tega treninga je, da skupaj z vami na letnem poročilu 2019 ustvarimo prvo vašo ESEF taksonomijo, kar verjetno mnogi izmed vas se boste spomnili iz naših predhodnih predavanj. Taksonomijo, ki boste ustvarjali na letnem poročilu 2019, boste lahko potem s pridom uporabili na letnem poročilu 2020, kajti dejansko, bom rekel, iz taksonomije leta 2019 lahko ohranite taksonomijo 2020 in ohranite vaše specifike, umeščanje, ki ste jih že naredili in boste kot tako, bom rekel, si prihranili oziroma določeno delo že v letošnjem letu začeli izvedli za naslednjo leto. Tako smo, na primer, s prvim podjetji, ki so se, na primer, z nami odločili, na primer, z Petrolom, že določili prve izobraževanja v septembru, ko bomo dejansko tale korak naredili in prišli do prve taksonomije. Seveda pa se mora vsako podjetje samo pri sebi vprašati, kje vi mogoče vidite vaše specifike, kakšen je vaš proces, kateri uporabniki bojo vključeni pri samo, bom rekel, potrjevanju in zaključitev tega procesa, da boste ESEF paket lahko na koncu dali v infohrambo. Zato smo tudi mi tukaj oblikovali različne možnosti sodelovanja. Naprimer, ena izmed možnosti sodelovanja je dejansko to, da pristopite nekem informacijski rešitev, se izobrazite za to informacijsko rešitev in dejansko uvedete v samostojno izvedbo le-tega. Vmes nastopa veliko izpeljank le-tega, bom rekel, tudi pri samem izobraževanju smo bili tukaj kreativni, zavedamo se specifičnosti letošnjega okolja, kajti večino izobraževanja je narejeno na daljavo, ker se zavedamo, da je, bom rekel, na izobraževanjih od 5 nekje tudi do 10 udeležencev. Smo na ADD-ju poskrbeli, da za samo izobraževanje zagotovimo tudi lokalno podporo. To pomeni, na izobraževanju je prisoten ADD predstavnik, ki uporabnikom pomaga delati v sami aplikaciji in da dejansko izkoristimo prednosti, bom rekel, nekega spletnega izobraževanja z dodano vrednostjo lokalne prisotnosti strokovnjaka, ki vas lahko vodi in vas na koncu lahko suportira v lokalnem jeziku in mogoče kasneje tudi pomaga pri nadaljnih vprašanjih, ki se pojavijo po posameznem dnevu treninga. Pri procesu izbora morate upoštevati tudi zunanje deležnike, ki sodelujejo v samem, bom rekel na koncu, ali revidiranju vašega letnega poročila, ali zunanje oblikovalne agencije, kako boste dejansko vozili vašo oblikovano letno poročilo. Tako da vse te teme smo že srečali, z veseljem se vsakemu izmed vami pogovorimo in oblikujemo optimalni model, ki je za posamezno podjetje. Seveda pa so te modeli, kot sem rekel, eno je samostojno izobraževanje in uvedba, drug model, ki je dokaj pogost, je, da se naslonite na nas ali na posameznega revizorja, da mogoče za vas pripravimo prvo taksonomijo oziroma vam ta predpripravo olajšamo. Razmišljamo o tem, kako sama izobraževanja deliti na različne vsebinske sklope. Naprimer, prvi korak sigurno si mora za cilj vsak postaviti, kako ustvariti prvo taksonomijo podjetja. Naslednji cilj je pa, kako v naslednjem letu bomo v obdobju, ko se mudi, ko je treba oddati v naš ESEF paket, kako bomo ustvarili slovensko in angleško verzijo, kako bomo vozili celovito grafično oblikovano letno poročilo. In zato pri večjih podjetjih v velikih primerih to izobraževanje delimo na dva sklopa. Eno izobraževanje je fokusirano na samo ESEF poročanje in taksonomijo, drugi del izobraževanja je pa predvsem fokusiran na vaš proces priprave letnega poročila, priprave več različnih verzij oziroma vseh zadev, ki so vezane glede na potrebe posameznega podjetja. Seveda pa pri vsakem modelu sodelovanja se zavedamo, da vi morate biti v samem procesu fleksibilni in neodvisni. Tako v primeru lastne usposobljenosti in lastnega priprave ESEF paketa, kot v modelu outsourcinga, v našem primeru na koncu dobite informacijsko rešitev, v katero imate dejansko vse pripravljeno in dejansko imate vi v informacijski rešitvi pregled nad procesom, vidite, v katerem statusu so posamezni zahtevki, imate možnost znotraj procesa delati neomejeno število validacij in lahko, bom rekel, morebitne neskladja oziroma stvari, ki jih bo na koncu tudi regulator na drugi strani preverjal, večkrat pri sebi preverite in uredite tako, da dejansko to, kar smo, bom rekel, videli v današnji prezentaciji, da je kakovost pomembna, da naredite letno poročilo brez napak in ga predhodno ustrezno preverite, zato da bo dejansko, ko boste letno poročilo oddali v infohrambo, skladen z vsemi pravili validacij, ki bojo nastopali v tem procesu novega poročanja. Seveda pa je naloga ADD-ja, oziroma kar vidimo tudi ključno, je, da imate lokalnega partnerja, ki se pri vas lahko oglasi, ki lahko skupaj z vami vam pomaga rešiti posamezno specifiko. Zato smo tukaj tudi v ADD-ju večkrat že na glas povedali, se zavedamo, da to ni proces dveh človekov oziroma nekaj ljudi, so vključeni tukaj zunanji deležniki in zavedamo se, da bojo v procesu vsi sodelovali in jih moramo zato ustrezno upeljati v sam proces, ki ga boste mogli izvedeti, da boste na koncu vi lahko suportirali oziroma dosegli vse cilje, ki jih boste imeli na tem področju, dokdaj je treba posamezno, na primer, ESEF paket vdati v infohrambo. Nazadnje bi poudaril še par prednosti Iris Carbon, ki so ključne pri tudi, zakaj smo se mi odločili za to rešitev. Je certificirana rešitev. Dejansko imate možnost fleksibilnega pristopa k implementaciji te rešitve, kajti prilagajamo izobraževanja glede na potrebe posameznega podjetja. Vse skupaj nastopa v identični platformi, imate znotraj platforme, imate napredne možnosti priprave letnega poročila, imate možnost neomejenih validacij. Cenovna politika je transparentna, predhodno skomunicirana. Vse podjetja, ki so z nami v kontaktu, vejo, da večinoma gledamo 5-letno obdobje sodelovanja. Rešitev je prilagojena lokalnemu okolju. Smo lokalizirali uporabniški vmesnik, ne nazadnje pa tudi sodelovanje z revizorskimi podjetji, kot bo za menoj imel predavanje Primož iz Ernst & Younga. Se zavedamo, da v tem procesu smo različni deležniki in probamo skupaj za vas, bom rekel, narediti vse, da vas suportiramo in da bo ta proces potekal gladko.
Mitja, za tvoj del. Zdaj pa vabim še, da Primož iz Ernst & Young pove njihov vidik in njihovo vlogo pri ESEF poročanju. Primož, izvoli.
Ja, hvala. Zdaj iz moje strani lep pozdrav. Malo smo mogoče potegnili preveč tale del, tako da bom probal skrajšati, da ne bomo preveč prešli tega dela, ki je namenjen za ta webinar. Kar se tiče naše vloge pri ESEF poročanju, bi rekel, da je dvojna. Ena je to, kar je bilo že v analizi od IRIS-a predstavljeno, in sicer kar nekaj, bi temu rekel, tehničnih oziroma metodoloških napak pri poročanju. To se pravi, vsaki družbi, ki je zavezana za ESEF poročanje, predlagam, da v zadnjem kvartalu tega leta naredi svoj temeljit pregled letnega poročila. V letošnjem letu, to se pravi za letošnje leto, so se pravi samo ključni izkazi, pri čemer v nadaljevanju potem pridejo tudi sama razkritja. In že v tem delu se je izkazalo, v bistvu, da je 25% napak pri 25% družbah izmed 17, ki so bila pregledana. Tako da to je en del, na katerega se mi kot Ernst & Young v tej fazi želimo osredotočati in pomagati družbam pri tem pregledu. Ne glede na to je še druga stvar, na katero bi opozoril in ki mislim, da jo je potrebno z revizorjem oziroma svetovalcem uskladiti, so tako imenovani extensioni. Videli smo, da posebej pri reguliranih družbah je teh extensionov še posebej veliko, zaradi tega, ker verjetno posledično je taksonomija pripravljena generično zaenkrat in je potrebno v bistvu prilagoditi za družbe, ki imajo mogoče kakšne druge postavke v bilanci oziroma v IP-ju in jih je potreba še posebej recimo se dogovoriti z revizorjem oziroma svetovalcem. Tako da glede tega se mi zdi, da je vloga v sami predreviziji oziroma v zadnjem kvartalu tega leta še posebej pomembna, da se pogleda oziroma da se za 2019 leto uskladijo številke oziroma vse pomembne zadeve. Druga zadeva, ki pa je recimo temu ni toliko tehnološka oziroma metodološka, je pa bolj procesne narave. Jaz si predstavljam, da bo proces priprave ESEF poročila tekel skupaj s pripravo letnega poročila. Ne predstavljam si potrditve letnega poročila in potem kasnejša objava ESEF poročila, ki bi lahko, ko bi bila narejena validacija, pokazala na kakšne napake v samem letnem poročilu. Tako da tle je potrebna tudi uskladitev oziroma pregled časovnice, ali so na voljo vsi resursi v tem času, da se pripravi letno poročilo oziroma ESEF poročanje v času, ki je potreben. Kar se tiče, bi rekel, čisto revizijske vloge, namen revizije je podati svoje mnenje na ESEF poročilo, izdati ločeno mnenje po standardu 3000. Tako da vse družbe, ki se verjetno ne bi vključile oziroma se odločile za neko izobraževanje oziroma nek pregled 2019 poročila za nek dry run, temu rečemo. Po mojem vedenju oziroma po mojem videnju tvegajo relativno veliko ugotovitev na 2020-letnem poročilu in s tem zamik v samem poročanju potem za leto 2020. Jaz bi v tem trenutku mogoče prekinil ta moj del. Mi smo z veseljem na voljo za vsa vprašanja, za pomoč v tem delu. Kot partner ADD-ja smo pripravljeni tudi sodelovati pri izobraževanjih, ki jih ADD izvaja za svoje stranke in za druge, zato da delimo svoje znanje in izkušnje, ki jih imamo kot mreža Ernst & Young iz drugih držav, kjer sodelujemo kot partner pri implementaciji ESEF-a na drugih večjih korporacijah. Tako da to je z moje strani. Hvala.
Zdravo, jaz bi se v tem primeru kar, bom rekel, odgovoril oziroma vezal na to, kar je Primož povedal. Mi smo dejansko z nekaterimi podjetji se pogovarjamo tudi, da bi bil Ernst & Young vključen v samo izobraževanje in pripravo hladne vaje. To pomeni, da v sklopu izobraževanja, ki ga mi ponujamo, v tem primeru bi povedal, da licenca oziroma uporabo Iris Carbon za pripravo hladne vaje je dejansko ni več plačljivo, kot bi bilo v prvih verzijah ponudbe, ki smo jih, bom rekel, mogoče delali v prvi polovici letošnjega leta. Zdaj pri sami konkretizaciji naše ponudbe smo prišli do tega, da dejansko za vse podjetja omogočamo licenco Iris Carbon in izvedbo hladne vaje vključeno v samo izobraževanje, tako da tukaj ne pride dodatni strošek za samo informacijsko rešitev. Ernst & Young oziroma revizorji, ki jih želite imeti pri samem procesu vključenih, lahko so prisotni že pri samem izobraževanju, lahko pa so prisotni tudi na nivoju, kot smo, bom rekel, z revizorskimi podjetji že oblikovali v posameznih ponudbah, da sodelujejo v nekem, bom rekel, pregledu ESEF poročila, ki smo ga naredili na letnem poročilu 2019 in pripravi poročila, tako imenovano Facts and Finding Report, kjer bo povzel ključne ugotovitve ter priporočila vezano na ESEF poročanje. Tako da v bistvu tukaj podjetja, ki bojo šla nekaj v hladno vajo, definitivno tudi želijo neko zunanjo mnenje, ki jim da nadaljnje usmeritve, kako se tega lotiti in kaj naj v naslednjem letu postorijo. Zdaj v tem primeru bi še tukaj vidim, da so se pojavila določena vprašanja, pa bi mogoče odgovorili šele na tela. Ali je znano, ali morajo podjetja objaviti letno poročilo na svoji spletni strani obvezno v tagirani obliki in ali je to odločitev posameznega podjetja, ali bo to objavljeno ali ne. To je dejansko vprašanje, bom rekel, za ATVP. Mi na tem mestu ne bi, bom rekel, sami dali mnenje. Naše mnenje je sicer, mislim, da je bilo priporočilo oziroma da edino uradno letno poročilo je letno poročilo, ki je pripravljeno v tej obliki. Bi pa mi v tem primeru, bom rekel, posredovali to uradno vprašanje na ATVP in vam naknadno poslali ta odgovor v pisni obliki. Razen, če lahko predstavniki ATVP-ja, ki vem, da so tudi danes prisotni na tem webinarju, mogoče že na tem mestu odgovorijo. Da ne bomo vsi, bomo rekel, mogoče čakali, ker je tole tudi, bom rekel, bomo mi uradno postavili vprašanje in to odgovor delili skupaj z vami.
Tako, sedaj pa smo prišli k koncu našega webinarja. Vkolikor so še kakršnakoli vprašanja, jih lahko sedaj naslovite. Seveda pa smo na voljo tudi kasneje ali preko elektronske pošte ali preko telefona, v ADD-ju, v Ernst&Youngu tudi in z veseljem vam bomo odgovorili. Tako da počakamo nekaj trenutkov. Vprašanj trenutno ni. Tako da hvala. Jaz se v imenu ADD-ja in v imenu Iris Business Services in Ernst&Young zahvaljujem za vašo udeležbo. Ta posnetek bo tudi na voljo in dostopen na naši spletni strani, kot je tudi Mitja Hafner predhodno povedal. Na našem informacijskem centru so na voljo dosti bogate vsebine iz področja ESEF poročanja, ki jih konstantno osvežujemo, tako da vljudno vabljeni na našo spletno stran in nasvidenje do prihodnjič.
Nasvidenje.